Donald Trump has just issued his fiercest warning yet against the British Prime Minister, and what followed has sent shockwaves through both Europe and the United States. King Charles III, who until now had always remained silent on political matters, has for the first time broken more than 70 years of royal tradition. America's leading tech giants are pulling out of London, taking billions of dollars with them. Meanwhile, British veterans have taken to the streets in protest. This is no longer a mere political dispute. It is a full-blown government crisis unfolding before our eyes. If you want to get ahead of the stories that are reshaping the global order, subscribe now, because what comes next may force you to rethink everything you know about international politics. It all began with the biggest political explosion Britain has seen in decades. 3 days ago, Donald Trump launched a blistering attack on Prime Minister Keir Starmer. His message was clear: stop restricting Americans' freedom of speech or face severe economic consequences. But Trump was not only talking about online free speech, he struck a nerve that has enraged the British public. A series of leaked documents last week revealed that the Starmer government had spent £1.2 billion renting luxury hotel rooms for illegal migrants. These were not makeshift shelters. They were 4-star hotels, complete with spa services and expensive sea views. At the same time, British veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan were left without a roof over their heads, sleeping rough on the streets of London. One heartbreaking example is James Patterson, a decorated former Royal Marine who survived 3 combat tours. Last week, he was found sleeping in a cardboard box outside a McDonald's in central London. Meanwhile, migrants were being served free buffets in hotels, all paid for by taxpayers. The moral contrast was so stark that even many Labour MPs could not bring themselves to defend it. And if you think the story has already peaked, just wait. This is only the beginning. Trump's reaction was immediate and uncompromising. In a primetime speech watched by over 50 million Americans, he declared that no foreign government had the right to silence American citizens. He also insisted that no leader should prioritize illegal migrants while veterans, those who sacrificed for their country, freeze to death on the pavements. His words left the entire auditorium silent. Britain, it seems, has forgotten how to honor those who served. While American companies are fined for daring to defend free expression, British veterans are discarded like rubbish on busy streets. But that, Trump declared, must end now. Just hours after the speech, the wave of reaction began to spread. American tech corporations convened emergency meetings, drawing up plans to relocate their headquarters out of Britain. A trade deal worth hundreds of billions of dollars between the two countries was abruptly suspended without public announcement. Technology stocks in London plummeted. Within less than 2 days, billions of dollars had been wiped from the market. Yet the greatest shock was still to come, and no one could have foreseen it. King Charles III broke the royal family's customary silence, leaving the entire political establishment stunned. At a charity gala for veterans, the king delivered remarks that were both pointed and deliberate, widely judged to be the most political statement since his accession. He stressed that those who had fought for the country must always come first, before all others. The room fell silent. The phrase, "before all others," was no accident. It was a clear rebuke of Prime Minister Starmer's hotel policy for migrants. It landed like a political punch from the head of the monarchy himself. For the first time in modern history, a British sovereign appeared to be openly siding with the president of another nation against his own prime minister. Royal sources revealed that Charles had quietly used his personal wealth to support shelters for homeless veterans. While the government abandoned them, the king had stepped into the void himself, offering a hand of assistance. That image left Starmer reeling. A monarch personally funding care for veterans, while the Prime Minister seemed to turn a blind eye. The moral contrast was so stark that no communication strategy could obscure it. On social media, the keyword veterans trended globally for 6 consecutive days, an unprecedented phenomenon. More than 2.3 million posts were shared, generating 45 million interactions, alongside countless viral videos capturing the stark divide between luxury hotels for migrants and veterans sleeping rough on the streets. These were no amateur clips. They were polished productions, split-screen edits juxtaposing lavish buffet spreads with Britain's heroes huddled in the freezing night. The contrast was so powerful that even major news outlets could not ignore it. People no longer needed newspapers to understand what was happening. The streets themselves were telling the story. In London, Manchester, Birmingham and Liverpool, thousands poured out to protest. These protests did not come from extremist political organisations. They were the voices of ordinary families, veterans associations and the middle class, people demanding answers. The echoes from Parliament Square rolled like an unstoppable wave. They chanted, "Homes for heroes, not hotels for migrants." Westminster Bridge had to be closed as the crowds grew larger. Many veterans in wheelchairs, some missing limbs from IEDs in Afghanistan, held banners aloft demanding, "Why are illegal migrants given hotels while they are left to sleep rough?" Inside Westminster, the political storm was intensifying. Cabinet meetings grew tense, descending at times into heated arguments. A number of ministers began to question Starmer's judgment. 3 junior ministers privately warned that the current policy had become a political liability. Several senior Labour MPs started gathering signatures to demand a review of spending on migrants, fearing they would lose their seats at the next election. More than 40 backbench Labour MPs openly opposed the hotel policy for migrants. Meanwhile, Nigel Farage and Reform UK were exploiting the moment with ruthless efficiency. Their Veterans First campaign surged 8 points in the polls in just a matter of days. Working class support for Labour was in freefall, and the shockwaves extended far beyond Britain's shores. The governments of Australia and Canada voiced concerns over Britain's internet censorship laws. Even EU officials were whispering the same question. Was Starmer's government edging Britain towards authoritarianism? Newspapers from Washington to Canberra ran scathing editorials. Headlines blared, "Britain turns its back on its heroes." Freedom of speech strangled in London. The climax came during Prime Minister's questions, when Conservative MP Sarah Henderson raised a photo of James Patterson, a homeless former Royal Marine. The Commons fell silent as Henderson spoke. No one interrupted. Could the Prime Minister honestly explain why gagging American tech firms took priority over giving a decorated British soldier a place to sleep? In the viral image, Patterson lies curled up outside a McDonald's, his medal glinting on a worn jacket, beside a piece of cardboard scrawled with the words, "Veteran, please help." Starmer stammered, eyes fixed on his notes, as furious criticisms rained down from MPs around him. In that moment, the Prime Minister looked utterly adrift. The economy continued to sink. American investors had lost confidence and were steadily pulling out of the UK market. The tech giants followed suit, shifting operations to cities such as Dublin, Amsterdam and Frankfurt to avoid the digital laws London was pushing. Google announced it was moving its content moderation unit from Britain to Ireland. Microsoft was steadily relocating key operations to Germany. Senior Treasury officials admitted in closed meetings that prolonged tensions with the United States could cost Britain hundreds of billions in trade and investment. Starmer's promise of economic revival after Brexit was crumbling. But the worst damage was not economic, it was moral. When both a foreign president and your own king openly question your decisions, while veterans sleep on the streets and illegal migrants live in luxury, you are no longer facing ordinary political criticism. This had become a crisis of legitimacy that no media strategy could extinguish. The images now saturating the public sphere told a story that no one could deny. On one side, a government-funded spa. On the other, a cardboard box on a freezing street. On one side, hotel buffets for migrants. On the other, veterans begging for food. Those still defending Starmer can only mutter about complexity and so-called competing priorities. But the public are no longer listening to such excuses, not when those who sacrificed for their country are shivering on the pavements. Each day brings fresh leaks, shocking new revelations of overspending on hotels, more heartbreaking stories of veterans, more viral videos fueling unprecedented outrage. Social media platforms are pushing this content higher as engagement soars without pause. The emotional power of this material is so overwhelming that every attempt by the government to respond is simply swept away. This is no longer an ordinary scandal. It has become a living symbol of Starmer's comprehensive failure of leadership. Out of touch with reality, dishonest, and willing to abandon soldiers while pouring public funds into illegal migrants. The group Veterans Before Migrants has attracted over 500,000 members in just 2 weeks. They are now running boycott campaigns, raising money to support homeless veterans, and producing content shared millions of times each day. Inside number. 10 Downing Street. Sources say the atmosphere is one of panic and dread. Ministers once counted among Starmer's closest allies are now beginning to edge away. Within Labour, quiet discussions have already begun about his future, whether he can possibly hold on until the next election. Some argue it may be time for him to go, for the sake of the party. The question is no longer, can Starmer survive this? But how much longer can he remain in office? Britain is watching a Prime Minister dismantle his own support base in full view of the public. And this crisis will be studied for years to come as a textbook case of failure in moral leadership. The political earthquake has only just begun. Aftershocks will continue to shake Westminster in the near future. And at the centre of the storm is a man increasingly isolated, desperate, and cornered. Trump's warnings were not only about free speech or trade deals, but about moral trust and the strength of leadership itself. And on that front, Keir Starmer has failed gravely. To such an extent that his own king has aligned himself with a foreign president in opposition to him. That is not merely a political failure, it is a historic humiliation, one that will cling to his legacy forever. What do you think? Is Starmer paying the price for a mistake the British people will never forgive? Could this be the end of his political career? Tell us in the comments. We read them all. And if you're as shocked as we are, share this piece with anyone who deserves to know the truth about what is happening in British politics today. The mainstream media may not tell the whole story, but we will.